been found not guilty on both charges.
Meagan McCarthy is a former deputy sheriff with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, where she served 6 years in roles including CPS liaison, school resource officer, and recruiter. Her career took a devastating turn when she survived a highly publicized on-duty shooting during which the suspect brutally assaulted her and attempted to execute her. Despite overwhelming evidence, the suspect was acquitted and released due to failed law enforcement legislation. After medically retiring for PTSD, Meagan shifted her focus to advocating for first responders' mental health. She also serves on the executive board for the Cover Now Foundation, working to reform mental health support for first responders. Currently completing her bachelor's degree in integrated psychology, she plans to pursue a master's in psychology with a focus on critical incidents. Recognized with the Above and Beyond Award, Meagan's work continues to inspire and drive others in the first responder community and victims alike. Most importantly, Meagan is a wife and mother of 3. This podcast was eye-opening. We didn't even talk about the incident that Meagan discusses publicly, but we talked about her profession, what led up to the incident, and the devastating legislation that allowed her attempted killer to get away free of any charges or very minimal charges at best. It's actually devastating what took place, but the podcast is great. It's very informative. So if you get an opportunity, check it out. Let me know what you think.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country.
Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
You can hear us fine?
Yeah, I can hear you guys great.
Awesome. Just don't yell in the mic, because it'll be really loud in my ears. All right, we'll just try to go with it. I don't know what the hell I did. We have a guy that does the, I guess, producing of it. Yeah, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I did everything I knew how, and that's basically unplug shit and plug it back in, because that's all I know. So I
That's the only
apologize,
thing
but we'll make it
Nope.
work.
No worries.
All right, so I appreciate you joining us after the 3rd time, and even went through these technical difficulties. I don't know if you know anything about our podcast. We kind of just want to talk more about who you are as a person, and not so much what you've been through, and that one moment doesn't define who you are. Have you ever met Mike?
No, never have.
Nice to meet you, Meagan.
Nice
Mike's
to
my
meet you.
co-host. He's a cop. He's been a cop for almost 20 years. He's also an attorney, practicing lawyer. So it's kind of good to have a good business partner that is a lawyer on the side. So he has
is
a different
awesome.
perspective on a lot of things, but it's fun.
Well, good
Anyways,
for you.
we'll just jump right in.
Awesome.
Born and raised in California?
Yes. Born and raised. I was born in San Diego and then moved to a couple of other northern cities, Fallbrook, Murrieta, if you're familiar with the area, still Southern California. And then in the end of middle school, beginning of high school, my family and I moved to the high desert, which is where I live now. So I've been here for almost 20 years.
That's awesome.
Nice. So where exactly is the high desert located at?
So we are about an hour and a half northeast of Los Angeles. So basically the freeway I live off of is the main way to get to Vegas, which is how everybody is familiar with the high desert, because it's basically one way there and one way back down to the rest of California. So I live in a small little community. Everybody kind of knows each other. It's more rural. We used to be a bunch of farmers and ranchers, and I used to ride horses growing up. I did rodeo and bale racing. That's what brought us to the desert, because you could buy a whole bunch of property for pretty cheap back then. And yeah, just planted roots here, went to high school here, went to college here, and then I worked here. And the patrol station that I worked at was about 10 minutes away from my house.
It's amazing. Growing up, did you always have aspirations to be in law enforcement?
No, I actually never did. My mom was a paralegal, and then when she got pregnant, I'm a twin. So she stayed home with me and my twin sister. And my dad was a businessman. He traveled all over the world, was in telecommunications. He sold like software chips. I'm not really sure. He retired when I was in middle school. So I originally wanted to be in nursing. I wanted to be a flight nurse. I thought the, trauma aspect was really exciting. And I was in school for nursing, and my friend was like, "Hey, you need to come on a ride along. Like, you need to see what this is like." This was back in late 2014, early 2015. And I was like, "Yeah, I got nothing better to do. Why not?" So I went on a ride along, and I was like, "This is what I want to do. Like, this is where I need to be." So I applied to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, and it was my one and only pick. Didn't apply anywhere else. And 6 months later, I started the academy.
Was that
Wow,
pre
that's
or
awesome.
post Ferguson?
Pre Ferguson,
Okay.
because
So
Ferguson was end of 2015.
so you're fresh out of the academy right when Ferguson was going off?
Yeah. So I graduated the academy in June, and then the way that the county works is you go off to the corrections facilities. So you worked in the jail, and I was in the jail for about 4 or 5 months, and then I went off to patrol. So I got a glimpse of pre-Ferguson law enforcement, and then I left right before George Floyd policing. So I I loved my time as a cop. I was only a cop for 3 years. So I loved it though. I genuinely loved my job.
Do you have any siblings or family members in law enforcement, or are you just the outlier?
So my twin sister is a cop now.
Oh, that's
She
awesome.
was, yeah, she was in school to be a nurse, and then she got her cosmetology license and did stuff in the beauty industry. And then for some odd reason, when my shooting happened September of 2019, and she started the academy January of 2020. So right before COVID happened, she was in the academy during COVID, and she had gone on a couple of ride-alongs with me, and then of course I would tell her all of my stories, the good, bad, the ugly, everything in between, and it kind of lit that same fire for her, and I think she saw what it meant to me. I don't have a big family. It's really my mom, my dad, and my sister, and my aunts and uncles and cousins. We're kind of estranged. We're not very close. My grandpa died in 2013. My grandma died in 2020. So as cliche as it sounds, law enforcement was like an extended family for us. It was like the cousins that I never had, the people that you could call or text and they got you. So she saw that, and I think that's what drew her to it.
Like that family aspect, she brought it into herself too.
Yeah, exactly. Of course she would go on ride-alongs with me, and she would see, the CPR or the sex abuse cases, but then she also saw the side of you're giving back to the community. Like I said, we were not born and raised here, but from 2007, when I was in 8th grade and on, we lived here. So it was like you got to connect with the community that you were growing up in. And then, I had a daughter in 2013, and she had a daughter in 2017. So we were kind of like raising our kids in this environment, and we wanted to, at least I can speak on behalf of myself, is I wanted to raise my kids in a community that I know I was a part of.
Did she have any fear after your incident? We're not gonna go, we'll go in that later, but like, did she have any fear of your incident, or was it more that she wanted to do it out of, I don't know, making a difference because of your incident?
I
Or
think
do
a
you
little
know?
bit of both. I mean, she was at the hospital with me right after my incident. She was there every step of the way. She saw the darkest days of my mental health and PTSD. But then I think it also came to her as, if my sister can do this and she can get through it, then so can I. And, she had the desire before my shooting. She was in backgrounds, and she was just like, I feel called to do this. So I'm gonna keep with it. I'm gonna stick with it.
And Kenny and I both have brothers in law enforcement also. Obviously we're not twins. If you ever saw my brother, he's about a foot shorter than me, so it's pretty funny. But how is that with the siblings? Like, how you guys bouncing stuff off each other, or the talks, or how is that?
Well, me and my sister are polar opposites. So like if you saw us, you wouldn't even think we're related. I mean, I have dark hair now, but I forced myself to be blonde until I realized that I can't fake it anymore. But she has, my dad's Egyptian and my mom's Danish. So she got that olive complected skin, the dark hair, dark eyes. She's a lot more outgoing. I'm more introverted. So we're complete opposites too. But, when she was going through the academy or, on FTO, I would tell her like the realities of what I went through, but I didn't want to taint her with my experience because I of course was jaded and biased for what I went through, but that's not fair to her. I don't want to trauma vomit on her and just constantly be so negative. So I would help her with, if she would call me with a certain case or how do I go about this? And I would give her my experience. But it was interesting to kind of go through that together and then watch her become a cop. And unfortunately, we have an estranged relationship now. We kind of had some differences after my trial and after my mental health kind of rebounded. And I don't have a relationship with my parents either. So, unfortunately, mental health can either solidify relationships or it can break them. And, my experience wasn't the greatest, but that's okay. It happens.
Did you play sports or was it strictly like the rodeo type stuff in high school?
So I played soccer growing up, and then my dad kind of said, "Hey, horse shows are on Saturdays, soccer games on Saturdays, you have to pick." And I stuck with horses. So I started riding horses when I was about 7 or 8. And then I was in a really bad horse accident my sophomore year of high school and broke my leg, had to have surgery. So I had to quit riding, and I had aspirations to turn pro and to continue going on. But life has a funny way of interrupting your plans. So I unfortunately stopped riding, and then I joined the varsity swim team in high school. I did track and field. So I tried to still stay active, but my heart lied with horses. And if I had it my way, I would have just stuck with that career path.
Do you think that competitive spirit from being in sports or in horse riding transitioned to you wanting to be in law enforcement at all?
I do. I think once I, set my goal on becoming a cop, and like I said, this was 2014, 2015. I had to fight for my spot. It wasn't like, here's $100,000 to be a cop. It was, no, there's 30 of you for one spot. Like whoever has the highest test scores, whoever has the fastest mile and a half, whoever can prove themselves. So I'm a very competitive person. I'm a very once I put my mind on something, that is it for me. So I spent every single day doing whatever I could to get that spot. And then I ultimately did. And, I had my struggles in the academy. I caught pneumonia like 3 weeks into the academy. So my PT went down, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I got to, succeed in other ways. So I just studied case law and, the 10 codes, the radio codes. I tried to really still prove that I belonged there just because, I was in the back with an inhaler. But, I think that type A personality thrives in law enforcement. And I think a big part of that comes from people who had that same mentality, because it's like the discipline. Like if you want to be good at sports, you have to put in the work. It's not just showing up on game day. It's training 5 days a week, all of those things. So I think it really translates to law enforcement.
We talk about that a lot in our podcast about the sports aspect and how that relates to law enforcement, just that dedication to training and getting better, and the strive to be number one, or, just get ahead of everybody. So you're going to go after the next person. And I don't know, it always comes up in each one of our podcasts, that, sports related analogy.
And I think it's also that teamwork aspect, because of course, when I played soccer, I was mainly goalie. I had no fear. I would take cleats to the face. I would slide tackle people and get red carded, but I wanted to be the absolute best at my position, but I knew I needed a team. And it's it translates to being a cop. You want to be the best either in gangs or narcs or SWAT or training, whatever you want to do, but you have to rely on your team. It's a team sport at the end of the day. You can't just, leave your partners high and dry. You still have to take care of your beat, take care of, the calls for service. You can't just, slough off all of that stuff, but you also have to work at being the best for everybody around you. And that's exactly what, a team in sports does.
Absolutely.
I think of, with the camaraderie compared to team sports and then the police department and also like the specialties. Like in order for the specialties to work, you have to have all these other components working together. So, I mean, with even in the specialty, you're going to have personalities, but together it's a good team. And then within a department, the specialties make the whole department kind of work well together. It's very similar to sports. I don't know if that is always the transition, but it seems to be, at least in our era, very like common where sports transition to people being cops or first responders in general.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it's a good transition, whether you're leaving high school and joining the military or you're going to, pursue a first responder role. I think having that discipline to still stay active and being a worthy team member is a huge attribute to becoming a cop.
What were your aspirations when you became a cop? Like is there any specialties that you were trying to get into or eventually wanted to get into?
Yeah, I wanted to be in investigation. So whether our investigations bureau was split either homicide or crimes against children, and I was a school resource officer and I had 6 elementary schools that I was responsible for and I loved it. I know people rag on, SROs and, kid crimes, and of course it's not the most glamorous part, but I loved it. I genuinely loved it. Even the hard times when I had to, go investigate the child crimes with my kids at school, I knew that I was protecting them from something else. Like not to take away from narcs or drugs. And I, had plenty of, wall stops or T stops and you get the dope and it's a huge adrenaline rush, but they go back and it's kind of like a cat and mouse game. With the kids, it was like, I'm removing you from a situation where I know you're going to be better afterwards. And it was just a sense of like a validation. Like I just felt good in what I was doing. So I really felt called to either investigate homicide or crimes against children. And I think if I had to pick, I would have gone for the crimes against children position.
I think it takes a special person to first be an SRO, but definitely to be one that can pursue the people that are hurting kids, because you have to have some type of mental ability to relate to them and make it seem normal. Like if you're going to investigate them and you want confessions in this, you have to almost like normalize it. And that's one thing that I really struggle with against crimes against women and kids. I can't like normalize it in my own brain. So I know for a fact I would struggle with trying to normalize that if I was speaking to an offender in those situations.
Well, and I know, this is obviously a hair trigger for a lot of people, but, women cops, women in law enforcement in general, and everybody immediately says like, well, then you shouldn't be a cop. But that's exactly where women could be utilized. Like, do I think we need women being SWAT operators? If you can pass the standards and you can, do the job, sure. But I would get way more information just being a female and being relatable and understanding and channeling. Like I was a mom, so I felt like I could talk to these kids better than, no offense, but a 5-year-old who just endured the horrific, rape doesn't necessarily want to talk to a 6'5" burly SWAT guy. Maybe she wants to talk to somebody who's more feminine and nurturing and emotional. And I loved it. I had no problem with it. My partners would call me all the time. Hey, we have a 5150 suicide subject. It's not working. Can you come try and talk to him? Just having that female component, like you said, it's all part of the team. I was never going to be the person with the ram trying to bust down the door, but I could be utilized in the way that I talk and my nurturing ability. And I think that's why I was really drawn to being an SRO for those young kids and the crimes against children, because it was where I felt like I belonged, and I would have had no problem spending the next 20 years of my career there.
And I think that's a lot to do with like putting people in the roles that support it best. Like you said, you're a woman that can talk and be more compassionate, because if a crime involves like a man and I'm 6'6", 260 pounds and bald and have a beard, like they're not going to be as compassionate than they are to you. And the same goes with knocking down doors, going in on a SWAT call. But everybody's got their purpose in this team that goes about it. And also, like you said, if you pass everything else, you can absolutely be part of whatever you want to be a part of. So I don't think we need to pigeonhole everybody just because of their gender or their size or everything, but we got to look at all aspects of what they do, how they are, personality traits, everything to put them in the right position to succeed as a team.
Absolutely. And, I kind of look at it like running a restaurant. And I know that sounds really weird. Like, why would you call law enforcement a restaurant? But everybody has their place. You have the hostess, you have the bus boys, you have the waiters, the cooks, the managers. Everybody has a specific role in making sure it runs well. And that's exactly what needs to happen on a shift. I knew who I could call if I needed help with, finding a hidden compartment from those like interdiction people that had those backgrounds, or I know who I need to call if I have a question about, tattoos for a gang member. Like everybody has their specific things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be everything. And I think that's something that people need to hone in on if, they're looking to become a cop, or if they're still, in the police world, is you don't have to fit in every box. Just find something that you feel called to and become the absolute best at that. Like I took, 40-hour crimes against children classes. On my days off, I was paying for training so I could identify, bruise marks or what they meant, or, fractures on x-rays. Like I wanted to be the absolute best at that position, but I was never going to go try and be, a gang intel officer, or try, because that just wasn't me. And I didn't want to pretend. And, obviously on patrol, you kind of have to be a little bit of everything, but that doesn't mean you can't lean on your partners to be that professional or that, expert that you need.
I think law enforcement has a lot of niche spots that you could fall into. And I think if we as a profession would look more into that type of training and hiring specific officers for specific roles in police departments, I think that the profession would look a lot better. And I think there would be a lot more growth, instead of the way we do it, just a blanket statement of let's try to hire whoever we can. And then as they develop, let's find a spot for them. But if we were struggling on having, say, homicide detectives, and someone wanted to come from another agency, I think that that's a great way to make your department better without forcing him to go back into patrol and then work his way back up the ladder. And I think that if you, as an administrator, focus on like the strong suits of your individuals, give them the ability to work on those niche avenues of whatever they enjoy and they're good at, then I think that it as a whole, it'll make the department a way better place to work and more enjoyable place to work.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I can only speak on behalf of the department I used to work for, but just like anywhere else, the retention is gone, the recruiting is gone. We're losing 14 deputies a month, and people are just leaving in droves, whether they're going chasing those $100,000 lateral bonuses, or they're just retiring and going into a different job market. But what happens is, we'll have somebody who promotes a detective, and then we want to give them detective experience. So we put them, hey, you write great reports, go to homicide. And then they become so specialized that by the time it's time to promote, it's, well, you need to go spread the wealth somewhere else. And then you go to this random position. And instead of letting people, like you said, develop this super great niche for themselves that also benefits the department. So I think we've gone into this really bad realm of job filling instead of going after like the alphas and the people that are going to do the best. It's just, well, you fit this box and we need a position, so we're just going to slide you in there. And I think that's why we're seeing the shift, and I hope the pendulum starts to come back. But, we've been hiring managers instead of supervisors and leaders. And I think that's a really big downfall in the profession right now.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of that too is at some agencies, not necessarily mine, but I see agencies where they put people in positions that they're not going to be threatened for that position. So if I'm an administrator, I know that this guy will do this much work. The guy that might be better for that position is going to work his ass off. And then I don't want him to outshine me, or I don't want him eventually to come after my spot. So let's keep him further away, and we'll take the guy that's going to do just enough to make me look okay, but not propel the department in any trajectory, because I don't want my position to be taken over by someone that I put in a position that has that kind of power.
Right. I agree. I mean, I saw it when I was working. It was kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like, oh, this is a pretty, cush spot. You can just kind of do whatever you want, instead of taking that person and allowing them to develop their skills or flourish on the skills that they already have. It's always the needs of the department, but what about the needs of the person? Because like my husband, for example, he's been on our SWAT team for 8 years. Like, he did not become a cop to be a cop. He wanted to be a SWAT operator, and he is very good at his job. but it's like taking him and saying, hey, well, we need an elementary school SRO. That person, for one, is going to do horrible. They're going to hate their job, which is going to project onto the community. And then now we're going to stay in the community with thinking that this is the perception of all cops. They're all angry. They're all disgruntled. Instead of just letting that person be what they are called to do, that's still the needs of the department. And I think, I understand that city managers come and they say, hey, we need this position filled, or we need that filled, or we need that. But departments really need to change their view. Otherwise, people's perception on law enforcement already isn't great. I'm hoping in the next couple of years we can kind of change that. But a lot of people are not fancy to cops. And part of that is, taking the person and just molding them to be what you expect them to be instead of what they want to be.
And I think with promotions too, like a lot of bigger agencies I see, instead of promoting where you're at and you've spent so much time to perfect this area, they promote you to wherever the position is. So they'll move you from, you spent 10 years doing this, and then they're going to move you to, like, say SWAT, and they move you to, like, in charge of the canines or something. Like, you have no idea, but that's the only promotion spot. And so now you go in there as the supervisor that everyone underneath you already has more knowledge about dogs, and you're like, what the hell am I doing here? Kind of. And then if you're not a good leader, you're going to be like self-conscious about that. And then that just creates an awful cycle of, I don't know, poor leadership and then defiant officers.
Exactly. I agree. That's how our department is. We move so fast. We have the largest county in the entire nation. So we cover a lot of ground. We have a lot of deputies. We have a big population of people that we have to serve, but people move and change so fast that now people are kind of catching on, and they're like, well, I'm just not going to test for sergeant. I'm not going to become a supervisor because I don't want to leave. I'm just going to stay here forever. And then you're, threatening the development of the department where you need people to supervise people, but then people are like, nope, I'm not going. And, like you said, it dings on the morale. And I think people need to take some accountability that's in these leadership roles and start questioning the brass and start questioning executives and saying, hey, like, we still have a job to do. I get that, but the needs of our people should be a priority.
I think that should be the most important part. Like, where are we going back to putting people in the position, like, where do they go that's going to be most beneficial to the department, regardless if they're testing to get a rank or not. If they're doing great in this position, they should still promote. They should still get, the extra pay and everything, but we're not going to take them out of what they're good at, because that's where they need to be. They need to mentor everybody below them to eventually, take their spot. As part of that, what we've talked about before is the animosity of, hey, I don't want them to get that position, or I don't want them to get promoted, or whatever it is. And my mindset has always been, I want to prepare people that are younger than me to take my spot. Like, that's more important to me, to give them the knowledge and experience to eventually push me away or go above me, whatever it takes, or I retire and I leave. And I don't see a lot of that. I see more of the disdain or whatever to people that go into these specialty units, or, SWAT, canine, interdiction, whatever it is, and they just want to hate on it. And I think that just is a downfall to us as, law enforcement, that we're just like, we're getting at each other rather than coming together.
Yep. I completely agree. I've been out of the game since 2019, but I still talk to cops from all over the country every single day. And everybody that I talk to kind of has the same common denominator that, people left in such huge numbers that people became supervisors and leaders that never should have been. They kind of got it by default. And so now you're seeing the repercussions of poor leadership being translated onto the rank and file. And then now the rank and file are the ones that are being caught on body cam, or they're doing poor decisions where, of course there's bad apples. I'm not going to sit here and say everybody's perfect, but our job has become so scrutinized that people can't even do their jobs. And I do believe a huge part of that is our leadership and our command not leading people right. The whole point of leadership is to lead people, is to push them in the right direction, where now it's just every man for himself, like, good luck. And that law enforcement does not operate that way.
When I first got hired, there was a lot of older officers that would help you out, and basically they would always preach, like, I'm training you to take my spot, and you should train the guy underneath you to take your spot. And that keeps a nice, like, smooth transition, because eventually you'll have a shelf life in this profession, and to like hoard your information or hoard all the knowledge that you have or anything else, like not helping the people underneath you to succeed is just it's a bad look on you as a supervisor or as an administrator.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the best thing you can do is to have your predecessors be more successful than you. That's when you know you've done a good job. It's not when the person beneath you is getting rolled up because they, failed at FTO, or, they tested so bad on the detective test that they're going to be, a deputy or an officer forever. It's when your people do so well that they're constantly being pushed to be specialized or be promoted. That's when you know you're doing your job.
The one thing that I would say is, like, when people pass up rank, the people that deserve it and should get it, what happens is you have the people that shouldn't get it are getting it. And I feel like that's kind of the cycle that maybe the past 10 years we're in, is you have these great officers that don't want to move out of their position because it's a specialty position. They love doing the work that they're doing, so they don't test. And then all of a sudden the guys underneath them that have they haven't been out there working. They've just are great test takers or whatever. Then all of a sudden those guys are starting the ones to get promoted. And it's been a I don't know, detrimental to the profession, just because those people are the ones that are in chief's roles that never did anything to get there. They don't have the experience to get there. So if you come to them with some questions about what took place, they can't explain it because they've never done it. And I think then those are the ones that get on TV and look like idiots because they throw their officers under the bus, but they've never been there or done it. So they don't have any relevance of even speaking on it, but they're the face of the organization at that point, and they have to say something, and God forbid they go against the mass media way of thinking.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I'm actually working with a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy right now who was involved in a pretty high profile use of force, and he became a political pawn from the LA sheriff, and they filed an indictment of color of authority against him, and he's facing up to 10 years in federal prison. And any cop who has gone through any type of training, whether it's, for us, it's like the California police officer standards and training on how you detain, for one, a robbery suspect, which is already a dangerous felony, but dealing with, the use of force continuum, he did his job exactly how he needed to. It was caught on body cam. It was caught by bystanders. He did nothing wrong, and he's potentially leaving his family behind to go to federal prison because his commander, his sheriff, who was, a political pawn. He was, elected, but he was in a position that he never should have been, ever. But people are so afraid to stand up and speak up and do the right thing that people, like you said, are sliding into these positions just because they're not afraid to, wear the stars and be the person in front of the cameras when they're putting an entire stain, not just on that department, but on the entire profession. And that's one thing that I am super passionate about, is holding our elected officials accountable and working with local lawmakers and assemblymen and women to try and at least correct a little bit of what they're bringing down the pipe, because it's just completely unfair and unjust, and cops do not deserve that type of treatment.
You're in a tough state to be combating that. You're probably in the worst one to try to make an impact. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying it's a hell of an uphill battle for you.
Oh, it's an uphill battle that's on fire. I feel like I take one step forward and then I get knocked 10 steps back. But, it's something that I believe in, and I wasn't ready to stop being a cop when my incident happened. So this is my little way of still giving back to the community, still doing what I can. And, unfortunately, I testified up in Sacramento last year to try and get rid of a bias against law enforcement bill, and basically the lawmakers laughed at us. So then I said, okay, well, now my mission is to take your job. So I got involved in the local campaigns, and I got involved in local politics, and we flipped some seats. So now my mission is, if you want to be completely not having any type of partialness towards you just because you hate cops, then we're going to take your seat.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great. Like, it's going back to that, like, when you got these leaders and they just roll over and want to just let their officers be out and, not stand up for them. Like, we need more impactful leaders to go out and put out the narrative before, we let the media take it over and, paint the bad cop picture and everything. So I don't know, how do we get the leaders in law enforcement or in even our community and the politicians to stand up for, like, I'm great with calling out bad police officers. If you do something wrong, you break the law, you violate somebody's civil rights, I'll be the first one to say you need to be punished for it, but not to get out there like the situation you're talking about where they do everything right, but the narrative gets painted a certain way by the media and they just throw them under the bus.
I think one of the biggest things we need to do is get rid of these civilian oversight committees. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have never been offered a civilian oversight committee for a healthcare professional. And if you just look at the data and the statistics, we have more bad nurses and bad doctors that maliciously kill patients by the hundreds of thousands compared to police officers. And I have never once seen civilians allowed to sit on a board and say, well, he or she did his job or her job right or correct. And we have people that literally have no idea what it's like to answer a 911 call or be spit on or shot at or have your life threatened, and you have split seconds to react. We do not need civilians chiming in. And that's a hard line that I draw out in the sand. And of course, people will argue with that, but law enforcement never should have been politicized. It never should have been in lawmakers' hands. We never should have had people that chime in and make laws depending on what we can do. If you really want an insight, go talk to the rank and file. Go ask them what they need. It's just like what we saw, what happened with the Los Angeles fires last couple weeks. The fire department was completely defunded. They lost millions and millions and millions of dollars to get gear, to buy new stuff that they needed for their stations. So they were unprepared, aside from, the water hydrants being empty. But everybody's first knee-jerk reaction is take it from the cops, take it from the firefighters. When we're seeing that shift now of, oh crap, we actually defunded everybody when they needed more training, they needed more resources. So we need to take law enforcement away from our elected officials. Like, there should not be a standard for you to have a decision. I mean, like I said, I've been out of the game since 2019. I don't even know what it's like to be a cop anymore. I can't even tell you my opinion on, of course, I understand use of forces and I can see, a bad interaction, but it's not up to us to Monday morning quarterback. If you violate policy or you violate law, that should be the standard. It shouldn't be the public's perception on what looks bad on body cam, because the work that we do hardly ever looks good.
Yeah.
Right.
I literally wrote that in parentheses because I always say, like, policing and law enforcement should never be politicized. It shouldn't be a single party either way. Like, the legislators pass laws that we have to enforce. Those are black and white, like what you can and can't do. There's no reason to start making this shit political. And I don't know if it's always been that way, but I don't know when we have became a political pawn. And I'm not for both sides. I mean, when we do something good, certain political parties will hold us on a pedestal. When we do something bad, like, it shouldn't be that way. There shouldn't be this huge swing either way. It is what it is. It's policing, and policing doesn't look pretty when people want to fight you and you have to fight them back. I mean, if there was a way to change society where they couldn't, I don't know, incapable of fighting us or some outrageous thing that, I don't know, then maybe it would be pretty, but I don't know. We do a job that isn't pretty by any means.
No, they say the world should never see the world through a cop's eyes. I can't even tell you how many 12-hour shifts I had where I went home that day and I was like, oh, today was a good day. Like, today was okay. Even if you get by and you make it home and you take off your vest and you're like, okay, I'm home, there's still things that happen during that day where you're like, that was a close one. Or, that pursuit, thank God I didn't, get sidetracked by that semi and go off the side of a mountain, or, going to arrest somebody where they know what they did to their child and you're there to be the buffer. It's not pretty. We have to operate in these margins of zero error. And if you make one mistake, if you operate in 1 ounce of being a human being in that gray area, then your body cam is out there and you have these people who all of a sudden they're experts on, the Tueller drill and perception reaction time and force science. And everybody wants to say, oh, that's impossible. You have no idea. You don't know what it's like to be threatened with a knife, threatened by gunfire, being punched in the face. If you have never walked the line, you don't get an opinion. And that is something that I more or less said up in Sacramento to these lawmakers, and their reaction to me was this is an eye for an eye for basically the George Floyd 2020 riots, and everything that you guys did, this is what we are going to do by imposing this bias where it's a constitutional violation, but people can be biased against you, and California allows that. And, you know, that's just one instance. There's California, like you said, is probably one of the toughest states. I know that there's other states that are battling it as well, but you know, California is it's a special breed, but we're still fighting. There's still thousands of fair cops and fair prosecutors and, you know, United States attorneys that are still fighting the fight. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind is if we keep pushing these people away, we're not going to have any fighters left. People are just going to give up and they're just going to say, okay, have at it. And then what? Who's going to answer the call?
Exactly. So what do you think, you know, you're an advocate on PTSD and everything. What do you think the politicization and the way that we're treated with the media and these laws and stuff that they're bringing out, how do you think that plays a part in the PTSD that goes on with police officers?
Oh, I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt that it attributes to at least 90%. Of course, the things we see, the things we do, it's not, I keep saying it's not pretty. Like nobody wants to pull a dead baby out of a pool and do CPR. Nobody wants to see the mates in the car accidents, but it is the constant cloud over your head on, am I going to be prosecuted? Am I going to be the next cop that ends up on NBC Channel 5? Are they going to come for my family? I'm the breadwinner. What about my kids? What about the health insurance? What about my home? What about my wife? It's this constant feeling of political persecution. And it's this constant struggle of, am I going to have a place to go to if I need it? Am I going to have a command that is going to make me the sacrificial lamb, or are they going to have my back? Do I have a sheriff or a chief that is going to say, yeah, you know, you guys may not like it, but he or she did their job? Or are they going to say, you know what? Yeah, here you go, FBI, here's their file. Go ahead and do what you need to do. And the DOJ, I mean, the DOJ came in and completely took their hand over everything. And that is a huge strain on, I'm not sure if that's a nationwide rule. I know that's at least California, that any use of force, the DOJ automatically investigates. So to keep, you know, party lines out of it, because that's really not the point here, but we've had a weaponization of our profession. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't think you can go a week these days without hearing some cop being indicted or fired or charged with something on the legacy media. And when I sit on a board for police officers and their families that have committed suicide, and what happens is they get facilitated through our foundation to get financial aid because, you know, if you're shot and killed in the line of duty, of course, that's tragic, but you get so much help. Your family gets so much help. If your loved one commits suicide, they give you their last check and that's about it. And this foundation I sit on, we issue checks and help towards the families. And just in the month of December, me personally, I facilitated 4 phone calls. 3 of them were women. They all were single moms. They left behind 5 children who are now orphans, and 1 was a retired gentleman. And after talking to the families, they felt like they were constantly scrutinized, like they could never do anything right, whether it was at their own department or whether it was on the perception of the media. They felt like everything they did was under a microscope. And, you know, unfortunately, like I said earlier, we have gotten accustomed to job filling positions and maybe not doing the vetting of people to see if they truly can handle this. But we've just said, okay, here's a badge and a gun, like, good luck, thank you for your service. When some of these people, I think they're just not meant for it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. If you can't handle it, there are other things to help out the law enforcement profession. But I can tell you right now that the politicization of our profession attributes to at least 90% of the phone calls I get.
Wow. Do you think that so as a cop, you kind of sign up and you know what you're getting into. Like you kind of prepare yourself mentally to see the stuff that you're going to see. I mean, it's not going to be, I feel like we're getting further and further away from that. But when I got hired, I knew that there was a possibility that I was going to see dead babies and these horrific things that no human should have to see or go through. But we kind of prepare ourselves for that. Do you feel that I don't know, me personally, I feel like the inner stresses and the inner administration stress or supervisor stress that come down on officers. I feel like those cops are feeling that their back is being turned by their supervision and within their department. And I think that's what leads a lot to the stressful to things. And I think if we started to dissect the suicide rate here, I bet more of them have more issues with stuff that is happening from within the department than the shit that they're seeing outside.
100%. I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, I remember going through the academy and you would watch videos of, you know, not the actual child abuse, but the aftermath and what that looks like, and dead bodies, and, you know, CPR on car accident victims. Like you said, we know that we are signing up to do a job that only 1% of the population wants to do. And I was prepared for that. I had been in other fights. I had fought people that, you know, were out to get me. But I think the difference in my situation, where I ultimately retired for PTSD, is I felt like I had departmental betrayal. I felt like I was a used towel that was thrown off to the side. And it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. What came first? I don't know. If I would have had the support that I needed from the get-go, would I have been able to go back to work? Maybe. I'm not really sure. I was fed 6 different prescription pills, and I only heard from my supervisors every 60 days when my off work note expired. I had my psych benefits canceled after 250 hours because I wasn't meeting improvement. So they said, you're not getting better. We're not going to pay for it. And so I would go to my private insurance and say, I need help. And they said, well, it's workman's comp. You got to go to workman's comp. I'd go to workman's comp. Oh, but you're, you know, termed out. You have to pay for it. $300 an hour out of pocket.
Damn.
And so I'm sitting here like, I lost 50% of my income. I have children. I have a home. I have responsibilities. Now you want me to spend basically a mortgage a month on my own mental health. I might as well just kill myself. And, you know, August of 2021, I attempted suicide at the hand of these pills. And when I look back, and I've done so much work now through my own mental health of, I don't want to leave my children without a mom. That's not fair to them. I want to be the better version of myself. But if I would have had the support where I knew that if I needed to say, hey, I'm not ready to come back, but just give me a little more, give me a little more. And I felt like I was a person, not a position, maybe I would have been able to go back. And I think if we have that tune towards a lot of the cops that are filing PTS claims, is it's the aftermath of the incident. It's not really the incident.
Oh, I totally agree on that. You know, there's not enough support for that. And I don't know if it's a stigma of law enforcement that they just want to pretend it doesn't exist. But like, I had a critical incident and brushed it off. And of course, my bravado was that like I can handle it, and I didn't do anything with it. I didn't talk to anybody. But my wife actually was like, you know, Mike's having these night terrors, went to the commander, told him, and they're just like, he'll be fine. He's good. And it never got addressed. And it was just like, why is this happening? Why aren't we taking more care? We worry about everything else. We worry about the way we're shooting, the way we're driving, everything. But mental health that we're going through is just not addressed at all.
I think people, it's kind of that notion, like, if you don't know what to say, just don't say anything at all. And I think that a lot of the time, I don't want to speak for everybody, that's unfair, but a lot of the time we have people in positions that maybe they came from, you know, the era where you just rub dirt on it, you get back in another fight, just, you know, get punched in the face one more time. And then it just kind of is what it is. Like, this is just, like you said, what we signed up for. You just kind of deal with it. But now we're seeing this culture shift where cops aren't making it more than 5 years post-retirement. And before it was the stress of the job, there's the job. But is it? Or is it the stress induced from harboring, you know, 20 years of critical incidents down, and now you're supplementing with alcohol and you're taking medication to sleep and you're doing all of these things instead of addressing the problem? If we had that mentality in the academy, just telling our people, like, you can come to me and you're not going to lose your badge and gun. Yes, if there's issues, we're not talking about the 5150s and the, you know, homicidal, suicidal, but if you just need to talk because that call really messed you up, you are able to. And some departments are implementing, you know, wellness checks, mandatory wellness checks. I actually worked with the California Sheriff's Association to mandate wellness checks every 3 months. So if everybody's doing it, then you're not the odd man out. It's just like our use of force training. Every 3 months, you have to go and requalify your duty pistol, your off duty, and then it's either CPR, defensive tactics, less lethal, whatever that quota is. I wanted to implement welfare checks, wellness checks. If everybody's doing it, then you don't feel weird for doing it. And we're still fighting for it. And it's like kind of common sense, right? Like why, like you said, why are you going to criticize me, parallel parking my unit and, getting these different things when you're not taking care of the person? Like we're just disposable. And we need to get to that. We need to get to the root of it. And I think I'm going to keep coming back to it, but I think it's our command.
My administration has done something pretty unique, I guess. Starting last year, they hired a clinician, and you have to go once a year. And basically, all she does, it's like 30 minutes. It's mandatory that you go. You don't have to. I mean, theoretically, you could sit there and say nothing. They can't force you to talk, but you have to go there. And she gives you the stuff that she can help you with, like places to go, all these things, and it kind of just opens that door and that line of communication between her and the officers. But again, I mean, if there's people that don't want to get help, they just have to go and sit there for 30 minutes and I guess stare at each other. I don't know. But I feel that gets rid of the stigma of now my entire department has to go. So if you go more, no one knows when you're going. It's between you and her. So if no one knows that you went there 30 times or if you went there just the one time. And I think that gets rid of the stigma that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's huge. I know that there's a really big problem with allowing people to take time to go do this because shifts are so short and we still have to answer 911 calls. Somebody has to be there. But mentally healthy cops make better cops. Like if you want a solid department and a solid agency, why would you not invest in your people? You're going to invest in, outer vests or the new gun that come out or the new, bolo wraps for FTYs. Why are you not going to invest in your people? Because if you have people that are answering 911 calls and they're going to doors of houses and they're angry, they're resentful, the next thing you know, that's going to be an even bigger problem. And I see videos of traffic stops or body worn cameras, and I'm never going to Monday morning quarterback because it destroyed me when people did that to me. But I can tell the cops that are like, he's not a bad cop. He just is dealing with some stuff, whether it's, pushing down stuff that he's dealing with, or maybe he got into an issue with his job and they're not taking care of him. You can just tell. And it's like, it makes me sad because a lot of these problems could be mitigated if you just invested in your people like you invest in the equipment.
Yeah, I think communication, you can tell a lot of times when a cop is having some issues, but just based on the way that they talk and carry themselves. Most cops that we see the videos on YouTube, because you never see like the nice interactions, but all the bad ones on YouTube, I'm sure that's a one-off for that officer. It's not like a repeat thing, because if that's a repeat thing, your longevity in this profession is not going to be there. So I don't know. If me as an outsider sitting back and watching it, I'm like, there's some other things that are taking place. And it could be just the past 30 minutes that he had to go and do something that was very traumatic. And now he's enforcing someone that maybe is driving like a jerk that's putting other people at risk. And then it all just comes out. It's not that he's a bad person. He's just having a bad moment.
Exactly. And I think that takes also the changing of the narrative with the public to say like, okay, yes, we are held to a higher standard. I agree. Cops should be held to a higher standard. If you are enforcing, people's civil liberties and the Constitution, of course, you better be doing a damn good job, but also allowing that bit of grace. So if you have a cop pull you over and, maybe he or she is a little not the nicest person, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to call for all cops to be banned and you're going to video him and, dox him and his family. It's like, why have we become so used to attacking people instead of having that bit of human element? I mean, I've dealt with cops now that I'm retired, and maybe it's because I'm biased, but I don't automatically assume that every cop is an asshole and every person is out to get me. And my first instinct isn't to try and get views on TikTok. And our society is just so backwards in the viewing of our profession that it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of effort to reverse it, or at least get that pendulum a little more midline.
Why do you think that it's become so socially acceptable to make cops the bad guys and the scapegoats?
Well, I mean, we can talk even further back than George Floyd, but I think the George Floyd riots really solidified, at least to our younger population, that you can loot, you can burn police departments, you can throw rocks and bottles at cops, and who's gonna do nothing? Nobody's gonna do anything. You're going to be basically a hometown hero. If you're the next person catching a bad cop on camera, everybody just wanted a cop's head. And, you know, for California, that one cop interaction triggered a landslide of destruction for our state, where now lawmakers wanted to get even. So they initiated laws for our cops in California on how they do their job or how they're perceived in court, which obviously does nothing for anybody other than allow people to walk free, like my suspect that never should have been free. But it really became huge, I would say, in my opinion, over the last 4 years, when you could watch your city burn and the cops just stood by. They were told to stand down. They were being told from people in much higher positions, like, you're not allowed to engage. You just need to let people be. And this is how they express themselves, instead of letting the cops do their job.
Why would you even call the cops to the scene? Why would you put them in this situation? Then you're not going to let them at least defend themselves and just let the people destroy the city. Like, why even put them out there I don't know. It's crazy to me. And were the politicians actually saying that, like, out loud, like an eye for an eye type shit?
Oh yeah, I actually just posted, well, I posted a video of it last April is when I testified, but I just reshared it today, of the assemblywoman who's an elected official. She said, and it's on recording, that, well, we know that a bias exists, so we are going to allow people to have a bias towards cops because of the social injustices you guys have done. I mean, how, as an elected official, a person who holds that oath of office, are you going to say for 88,000 cops in California, you can have your 14th Amendment completely violated because of your profession? I mean, it's unconstitutional. We're working on that aspect, but that's just kind of the status quo. Nobody's challenged it. People are just like, oh, well, you know, policing just sucks right now, but maybe it'll get better. And people are afraid to stand up and do something about it. I mean, I am a tiny, tiny tadpole in a huge pond, and I still get so much heat every single day just for standing up to try and do my little part, that these elected officials, they don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose their job, because the minute that you stand up for cops, you're canceled.
Right.
It's absolutely disgusting.
It's horrible.
You mentioned earlier that the nonprofit that what is it called? I'm just curious.
It's called Cover Now.
Cover Now?
Cover Now, yeah. It was started by a San Diego cop, and he is fantastic. And we're working to become basically the first national foundation, since there really is not one, for law enforcement. And we're making really great strides. We're unfortunately issuing out a ton of money because there is, you know, 2024 was better than 2023 in terms of numbers, but I've been on the nonprofit for about a year now, and the shift of the older generation to the younger generation, I mean, talking to families of deputies that committed suicide that are in their mid to low 20s, I mean, I haven't encountered that except for the last couple months.
That's insane. What are you doing now besides that?
Well, I am trying to figure out where my feet land. I don't really know, to be honest. I have a book coming out in a couple months. I am still working on my political aspirations of trying to get this Assembly Bill 3039 passed, which we're introducing in a couple of months again with a new body, and just trying to see what I can still do. I'm hopeful that we can start, you know, fanning the flames and seeing if we can get something going. But I am a stay-at-home mom to 3 kids, so I stay busy with them. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 11-year-old. So I don't know. I ask myself every day, like, what am I doing with my life? And I don't really have an answer.
I mean, you're everywhere, so I guess you're doing something right. I see you all the time on social media, so it seems like you're all over the place spreading that message. So I don't know, I'm appreciative of it anyways, the positive law enforcement message that you put out.
Thank you. I
Great to see.
appreciate it.
So when you talk about like pushing, you know, these bills and reforming and stuff as political aspirations, do you have any aspirations for being an elected official?
I am involved in my local GOP, my local parties here, as far as the county and my cities go. And if I could, I definitely would, but I do recognize the struggle. My husband, you know, works for the same department I did, so he can't just up and leave. And I have young children that I am responsible for. And I don't really have a great network of childcare. So a whole bunch of excuses to say that hopefully one day, but until then, I'm going to at least help lobby and advocate for whatever I can while I'm down here.
How did you build did you ever have aspirations to be political at all?
No. You know what's actually funny is my mom and dad are they've never voted, and if they did vote, like we never talked about it. We never talked about politics. My grandma and grandpa were like Kennedy Democrats, and I remember watching Ronald Reagan's funeral on TV and being like, why do people care? Like, what's so special about him? You know, like we never talked about politics. And then I started getting involved, not involved, but I started paying attention to, you know, who am I going to vote for president this year? Or, you know, kind of voted like coattails, like for my party. And then I didn't get involved and start really paying attention until I sat in trial and I saw firsthand the devastation of not paying attention to local politics and local elected officials. Everybody says, you know, the president is the most important, but the president doesn't even touch what we have at the state level or the local level or district level. So then when I found out about the jury bias bill being an assembly bill, I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, what's an assembly member? And so I spent months and months doing as much possible research about every branch of government and who does what, how you get there, what do you do? And I kind of by default came into politics because I felt like if I didn't, like I didn't want to be a victim of this poor situation. I always say, like, if you're not going to be a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. So I can't sit on social media and, you know, lick my wounds and say, poor me, if I'm not going to try and change it. So then I contacted my local assembly members and I said, who's going to help me? And I'll tell you, it took me about a year to find somebody who was actually willing to help. I talked to union after union after union. I mean, if you guys knew the level of corruption in police unions down here, I'm sure you have an idea. It's California, but man, I spent a year so defeated. Like, this is just the status quo. Like, there's no way. And then I finally found Assemblyman Bill Asaley, and he's not even from my district. He's from the neighboring county. And he was like, heck yeah, we're going to do this. So he authored a bill. We went up to Sacramento twice. We did a press conference, and I was like, this, at least what I can do aside from advocating for better mental health is if we want to change the mental health, we got to go to the very, very top of the problem, which is the lawmakers. So now my mission is to get involved in local lawmakers positions and House seats, Congress seats, senators, assemblymen and women, even as far as city council goes. So I'm trying to figure out what I can do because it's kind of like tentacles in all these different arenas, but none of them really land.
I would have no idea where to start. That's the only reason I was asking. If you had no aspirations and didn't know how it worked, like where the hell would you even begin to develop the momentum? I feel like you have a good momentum going. So I don't know.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think, you know, there's nothing worse than a woman scorned. So when they told me that you know, basically nothing happened to me in that courtroom and he's just free, I was like, hell no. This is not going to be the status quo for my husband or my sister or my friends. So what can I do? And like I said, I spent over a year trying to go whatever avenue I could, banging on every door I could. That's why I did so many news interviews, so many podcasts, so many articles, because I said, all I need is one person to see it. I just need one person to pay attention. And then I did a podcast with Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. And she got me in contact with somebody in, you know, the Senate. And I was like, okay, but it's a assembly, which is local. So it was a lot of moving parts for a lot of time that fell on deaf ears. Like I said, there's people on social media that will act like they're pro law enforcement, but when you ask them to stand up for law enforcement, they're like, can't really go there. If you know, support cops, you get canceled. I've had so many contracts canceled for mental health resources, whether it's conferences. I lost over 6 figures last year because I wouldn't give up the political stuff. They told me, if you want to speak at our conference or you want to join our organization, you have to stop. And I said, nope, no paycheck is going to sell my soul. I'm not going to be bought and paid for. This is what needs to be done. And that's when I discovered, you know, the fraud in the mental health community. And not to knock on anybody. There are amazing professionals in that arena, and there's so many people that deserve to be there, but there's also a lot of grifters, and I'm not going to sell my soul.
Ironically, we were just talking to John Mattingly 2 nights ago, and he was saying basically when he was trying to find a psychologist or a clinician to help him out, as soon as they found out, he got like blackballed until one guy was like a former military guy and was like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't give a shit, basically what they say. That is absolutely insane to me. I just feel like you've taken an oath as a doctor to help people. It doesn't matter the situation. You're willing to help criminals. And in John's situation, he was never charged. He was a victim of being shot and almost killed. Yet these doctors wouldn't help him get back. It was just
He was involved in
mind-blowing.
that incident.
Yeah.
So it's just automatically categorized as.
And they basically said, like, for our business, we can't do anything to you because no one else will come to us then. I'm like, that is the most fucked up mindset to have. It's insane to me.
And that's why, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, or how people view it, is when I come across these situations, I have no problem outing people because people deserve to know the truth. Don't spend $500 and your time away from your family to go to these conferences when, in all reality, behind the scenes, they're not fighting for you where the fight needs to be. They're fanning the flames of what sounds nice. I always say buzzwords and bullshit. Mental health has become buzzwords and bullshit. People don't actually want to solve the problem. They just want to monetize it. And that is one thing that, over the last couple months, I've kind of taken a step back from standing on stage because a lot of places won't work with me. They don't want to associate with me. And that's fine. I'm just going to do my own thing. And I'm going to keep doing what I believe in my heart when I lay my head down at night and I can sleep knowing that I am fighting the fight where it needs to be fought. And, I think very highly of John. He's a great friend of mine. We've had many conversations about this. And just like we were talking earlier, he was a political pawn. That entire situation was politicized. It never should have been. It never should have been even talked about. It never should have been a headline. John should have gotten the help he needed, and he should have been able to either go back to work or retire on his own free will without the opinion of the public.
I absolutely agree. How did you end up on Fox?
Well, funny story, I talked on NBC a couple nights after the acquittal came out, and the reel kind of was going around social media, and a nurse that I'm friends with sent it to this publicist, and the publicist contacted me and was like, hey, your story needs to be told on a national level, because everything I was doing was kind of local primetime stuff. And he was like, Fox will air your show if you want to go down to the studio in LA. And I said, absolutely. Like I said, I was willing to talk to anybody. Like I was going to talk to the mailman. I was going to wave him down and tell him my story. Like I didn't care. I wanted everybody to know what was going on. And so I went down to the Fox News at Night, Trace Gallagher show, and told my story. And, fortunately, Fox has been so amazing. Everybody there is so gracious. They said, if you would like to come back and, be a commentator and contribute for the crime stuff, we don't really have many people on the West Coast. And I said, sure, why not? And it kind of developed into this contributor role. So now I'm blessed enough. I've gone on Laura Ingraham and I've done Fox and Friends, and I go to Fox News at Night with Trace Gallagher pretty often. And they've just been really awesome to let me give a voice to law enforcement. And that is one thing that the producers always say is, of course, they have to stay within their parameters, but I'm allowed to talk about the political challenges that law enforcement face. And I was involved in the recall with Pamela Price and George Gascon and some of these radical prosecutors that made our job so much harder. They gave me the ability to speak on behalf of law enforcement. And I thought that was awesome because up until Fox, nobody was allowing me to merge the two worlds. And Fox saw that they went together.
Being introverted and going on national TV, how did you feel during that moment?
Well, I've definitely come out of my shell a lot more because I recognized I had to. It's actually funny. People always say, like, it must be so nerve-wracking to talk on live TV. I feel better talking on live television than I do even doing podcasts or speaking events, because on live TV, yes, there's cameras, but I'm just having a one-on-one conversation. And Trace is so amazing. He's just like, a buddy that I would talk to, where if I talk in front of 200, 300, 400 people at a conference, I'm picking up on everyone's energy. So some people are texting, some people are falling asleep, some people are like looking at me. I'm like, oh my God, they hate it. Do I stop? Let me change, let me shift. Being on national TV is so much easier, way easier.
Interesting.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah, me either. I
Yeah.
would have like, I don't know. I kind of, when I teach, I kind of feed off the people, there. So you can kind of feel that energy. And I don't know why it's almost like getting ready to play a sporting event for me. Like literally that's kind of like I have my routine. I'm like, I don't know, like superstitious or something. I don't know, but I don't know if I could go on national TV and sit there and know that there's like a million people fucking watching me. I'd lose my mind, I think.
You know what I will say is every time I do a Fox segment, I always get so many emails or messages from people just thanking me for saying what they wish they could say, because so often in our profession, if you speak up against a machine, you get blacklisted. You're not allowed to say these certain things, or they think it, but they're not allowed to speak up against prosecutors or sheriffs or whoever it may be, where I get a pension. Like I no longer need to clock in or clock out with anybody. Like I'm not afraid to do it. And like I said, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I've lost a significant amount of money for it. I don't care, because I believe in the message that our cops deserve better, and our cops deserve somebody to say it how it is for the betterment of the profession. Because one day, I have 2 little boys. One day, my little boys are going to want to grow up and they're going to want to follow in their dad's footsteps. And it's up to me right now to make sure in 20 years, I feel comfortable with them going through the academy. And if I just sat in a corner and I said, woe is me, oh my God, I got into a shooting, that wouldn't serve anybody. So the best thing I can do is go and advocate for everybody else still doing the job.
Amazing. We appreciate that.
Yeah, I've always said, like, even with our FOP, I always wish retired guys would be like the president or vice president, because they have no skin in the game. Like, you can go say exactly what you want, you can deliver the message, and it doesn't matter if the mayor doesn't like you anymore. Like, you can still do this in as an active law enforcement if you're part of that process. Theoretically, the mayor shouldn't be mad at you or couldn't do anything against you, but damn
They
well,
do.
yeah, like if you push that line too far, he's gonna be pissed off at you. Or it's a retired guy doing it, and that's even on a smaller level. So I'm happy that you are leading that charge. I just think that there needs to be more people, more retired cops, more cops in your position that can speak out and can be the voice, without, I don't know, active cops having repercussions brought upon them.
Yeah, because they're going to come after us no matter what.
Yeah, if I got out on stage and said some things that go through my mind, I think that it'd be problematic for me, and being an active cop.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that even when I was working, or through the lens of being on the outside now, I recognize how thin of a line people have to walk, especially nowadays. Like when I was working, of course, I was afraid of violating policy or doing something wrong and potentially getting in trouble, but I knew that I was doing my job right. Like I was never afraid of my actions. I was never afraid of my supervisor calling me in and listening to because back then we didn't have body cams, we just had bell recorders. I was never afraid of any interaction. But the thought now of having that black cloud over you to be the next person to be indicted, I was never afraid of that. Like when I was working, the thought never crossed my mind. Now I talk to people and it's like the minute they go, 10-8 and they go start to work, all they're thinking about is the next call going to be the one where, somebody puts me in a position where I have to operate in that gray area, and now I'm fired. Now I'm in prison. Now I'm in jail. And it's like, I can't imagine being a cop in today's climate. So the best way that I can try and give back is to do what I'm doing now.
I try not to think about those specific things. Like, I don't know. I feel
Sorry,
like
I just completely exasperated it. Now you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna think about it.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the most dangerous things in our profession now is that thought process of you're presented with lethal force and we're trained to react and we know what to do, but then all of a sudden something clicks in the back of your head and you're like, is this the time I'm going to go to jail? Is this something they're going to put me on the news and I'm the bad guy? And if we lose that chance that we take that split second and we think about that, that's our life. Am I going to leave my kids, my wife, without me? And that's dangerous to law enforcement. We shouldn't have to think about that. We should know that what we're doing is right as long as we're making these decisions. Because when you do make the right decision and then you get that anyways, it's horrible. And everybody else, and it's not just for you, it's all of law enforcement, because they look at that and they're like, that's not going to be me next. Maybe I'm not going to go to that call. Maybe I'm going to, not react that way. So I don't put myself in that position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I believe 100% that if we want to get to the root cause of the mental health crisis, we have to go into the political realm. We have to start holding people accountable for their decisions on what they're imposing on us. Like I said, with the whole healthcare thing, I mean, if people even knew the fraction of bad cops and bad nurses, like when have you ever heard of people on strike for a nurse that murdered 7 babies in the NICU? Like you don't hear about it. You don't hear about people, trying to fight nurses when they're leaving the ambulance bay. Like it's unheard of, but cops get followed home, they get doxxed, they get shot at, people get followed. Like our profession is unique in the fact that I truly believe unless you have done the job, you don't get a say, you don't get an opinion. And we have welcomed people's opinions that are not valid, and they're completely overshadowing the already dangerous job, the already, nuances that we know we have to deal with. Now you have to worry about the court of public opinion on top of the court. Like that should not be a thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Since we started down this avenue, I don't want to make this podcast about probably one of the worst days of your life, but do you want to tell us a little bit about that and then the outcome through court? That's what I'm
Yeah,
more interested in, that outcome of court, because it's fucking mind blowing to me.
Law enforcement, first responders, military veterans, we see things and put our body through stuff that no one else in society has to deal with. We are good at coping with it mentally, but it still takes a toll on our body. Hormone replacement therapy is a great way to keep your body functioning as it should. And I'm not talking about walking around looking like you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just the typical body that we need to function in society with mental health, mental clarity, performance in all aspects of life. I have several family members and friends that have turned to hormone replacement therapy in order to produce a better life for themselves and their family. We are thrilled to partner with HPTRT, veteran and first responder owned company that knows what we are looking for and what we need. They actually care about the first responders, they actually care about veterans. They know what we're going through, and they are willing to help us in any facet of life. Not only with the hormone replacement therapies, but also medical doctors that have partnered with major pharmacies across the country and willing to do any type of telehealth that you need. If you're feeling sick and you want to lay on your couch and do a teleconference, they will send medications to major pharmacies that they have partnered with. So if you need any type of medical assistance, from hormone replacement therapy all the way up until you just feel like shit and need some telehealth,
Give them the opportunity. Use code RED, RED, for 10% off.
My shooting was September 4th of 2019, and then it was delayed until the middle of May of 2023. We didn't start trial until then. And my perception of it was my deputy district attorney was so confident in the video that was captured by a neighbor that she didn't really put in the work like should have been done. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I understand the ins and outs, because I don't. But I was not allowed to do any preparation for court. I wasn't allowed to review my own report and belt recording because she didn't want to muddy the waters. And here I am. I have basically spent the last 4 years suppressing everything, forgetting everything so I can move on. That now I'm like, okay, I've done the work. I feel okay. I need to remember what I said to the homicide detectives because I'm going to go take an oath. I don't want to be perjurized. I don't want to be, cross-examined. And that's exactly what happened. I was cross-examined for 3 entire days. 3 days I sat on the stand for 8 hours being cross-examined. I was called a racist. I was called an attention whore. I was called heinous things, and nothing was objected. Nothing was stopped. And I remember every day going home feeling a little bit more defeated. Like I already knew the battle we were going to face in court because of California, because of the climate. But I went home more messed up about the outcome than I was after my shooting. And like I said earlier, it's not always a critical incident, it's the aftermath. And my aftermath was delayed 4 years, and I'm laying in bed like, holy crap. Like I don't even care what happens to him anymore. I cannot do this. So I go back and I'm, cross-examined for another day, and I'm looking over at the jury because, we're instructed to talk to the jurors. Some of them are sleeping. Some of them are scowling at me. Some of them are shaking their heads. Some of them are drawing. Some of them are picking their nails. And I'm sitting here like staring at my defense attorney, like, do you see them? Do something, do something. And nothing is done. I'm, recounting how I felt like I was going to die and he was going to kill me. And I'm looking at the defendant and he's nodding and smiling. And I'm like, does anybody see this? Like, am I in the Twilight Zone? Like, I'm literally hearing the song. Like, what is going on? So trial went on for 3 weeks and it finally went to jury deliberations. They deliberated for, I think, 2 days. And my husband and I got out of town. I told him I could not be here anymore. Like, I didn't have a feeling of like justice or relief, or I didn't feel better. I felt like dog crap. Like, I felt so bad. I was like, I got to get out of here. So we left, and I finally got a text like the verdict is in. And so my sister went to the courtroom, and I remember her sitting there like, okay, the jury is sitting down. Okay, the first count, assault with a deadly weapon against a police officer, not guilty. Attempted murder against a police officer, not guilty. Removal of a peace officer's firearm, not guilty. Battery against a police officer, hung. And then there was like 2 more other charges where they were hung. And then finally it was misdemeanor, negligent discharge of a firearm, guilty. And I'm staring at my phone, like waiting, like, haha, just kidding. Like everything, everything's fine. And nothing came through. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is a joke. And then my defense attorney or my attorney calls me and she's like, Meagan, I have bad news. And I'm like, what happened? Long story short, my attorney talked to the jury foreperson and said that because of this Assembly Bill 3070, during jury questioning, if you expressed a bias or a hatred or, discomfort, whatever, towards cops, you were allowed to sit as a juror. So 5 out of 12 of my jurors had this bias. So from the get-go, from jury questioning, they already hated me. Some of them had negative encounters with cops. They had family members that were negative. We even had an alternate that was sitting that said, do not call me. I hate cops. They're racist. They're bad. She's a white woman. I don't trust her. She became a primary juror. So,
Wow.
Jesus. Wow.
I mean, the cards were stacked against us from the get-go. So I remember asking my attorney, like, because we were in Arizona, I said, do I have to drive home? Like, do I give a victim impact statement? And she said, no, the court doesn't view you as a victim because negligent discharge is a victimless crime. So he's being released from custody tomorrow, 8 a.m. And my world just imploded for about the 3rd time. And, that was a hard pill to swallow, but I had done so much work in the last couple of years to keep myself out of relapsing back into that PTSD and the trauma that I turned it into this fight. And I warned my attorney, I said, okay, so obviously there's nothing civil. There's nothing I can do, double jeopardy. Okay, just so you know, tomorrow morning I'm sitting down with NBC and I'm going to tell them what happened. And she said, do it, go for it. There's nothing stopping you. So it kind of turned into this flurry of banging on every drum that I could possibly get a hold of. And then I researched this Assembly bill and I found out who created it, how it went through the process. And, one thing about California legislation is the Assembly Bill 3070 made it in to be signed by Governor Newsom within 2 minutes of the session ending. And within that, he signed over like 2,000 bills. So he didn't even know what he was signing into law. And it created this wave of people being released from custody. I've talked to a Los Angeles sheriff's deputy who was involved in a case and he became a political pawn. He was found, they arrested him for manslaughter. It was a guy with a gun, righteous. And because of me going public with my case, he decided to take a plea deal for manslaughter instead of going to trial because he was afraid of being convicted of murder. So this poor deputy, because of my story, went to prison, lost his job, lost his rights, was on, probation while his wife was pregnant at the house because of this law. So we have cops being prosecuted, we have cops being victims. It's happening all up and down our state. And that's when I really decided, like, I cannot sit by and just be a victim of this. Like, I allowed this person to be to take my job, take my career. He's not taking anything else. So now the one silver lining to that is the United States Attorney's Office has picked up the case, and in July of last year, they filed federal felonies against him, and we are going through that process right now. So I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that we will get another crack at justice. I am cautiously optimistic, but we have an incredible team of United States attorneys on our side, and I'm hoping that the scales of justice are a little more even this time.
That's awesome. I'm sorry that you had to go through it, but I'm kind of glad that you are, because I don't think many other people would have done or do what you're doing right now. They would have
Turn it
probably
around the way you did.
Yeah, you made a horrible situation into something positive. I don't know. I mean, it's as positive as it can be for the rest of law enforcement in general.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I keep saying this, but I loved my job. Like, I didn't want to stop being a cop. I wasn't ready to hang up my equipment and move on. And this is the only thing I can find that gives me that same self-gratitude, the same type of purpose. I spent so many years waking up with an identity crisis, because once you're a cop, that's all you are, and I said, like, this is just not going to be the end of my story. So what can I do? And I do believe God spared my life that day so I could continue to do this journey. And of course, I'm not thankful that I almost died, but I am thankful that I'm still able to try and give back in whatever capacity I can.
I know you got to go. So this is the last question we ask every guest. We teach for a company called Justice Academy. So what is your definition of justice?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I would say my definition of justice would be the fair and impartial treatment for every person, no matter your personal bias. And that is personal to me because I had a miscarriage of justice because of my occupation, and people get miscarriages of justice for the public opinion of others or the lack of opinion. So I think justice is the fair and impartial opinion without an opinion.
I love it. I appreciate you joining us. I know you got to go, so we'll do it again, and we'll talk more about other shit, I guess.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on with us, Megan.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.